Day 9 of OTAs is actually the final day of OTAs for us. Next week, we'll be back here for mandatory minicamp. Nick Faribault, Alan Saunders here for the Steelers practice report from the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex. Alan, today, like I said, this was the most eventful first day of OTAs. This was probably the most eventful last day of OTAs I can remember covering. Just everybody talking today.
Yeah, usually the last day of OTAs, it's like a rapid sprint off the field to the parking lot, to the plane, as guys try to get home. A lot of guys stuck around and chatted with us, so appreciate that. And yeah, I think we learned a lot today.
We did. I want to go to you first, though. You talked to Mr. Justin Fields, and we are going to the quarterback position today because a little bit of a mix-up today. You know, for the most part, throughout the first 8 practices we have seen, Russell Wilson has been throwing with the ones. It was a little different today. Justin Fields was throwing with a few of them.
He was with the ones was more like they were mixed up, right? They were trying to get, you know, Fields throwing to that first group of receivers and working with, they were flip-flopping centers as well. So like Nate Herbig has been the first center and Zach Frazier has been the second center. So it's been Herbig snapping to Wilson and Frazier snapping to Fields. They did a little bit of that the other way. They worked the wide receivers in with the other quarterback, and Fields said, yeah, you want to take this opportunity so that you have time with everybody. And he said, you know, he feels good about the amount of work he's gotten with everybody. He said even those guys that maybe he's not working with in team periods, he has taken off to the side, or when they'll throw before practice, he'll try to get with those guys. But he feels good about, you know, the number of guys he's been able to work with. And he said specifically, George Pickens is not a guy he obviously needs any introduction to. Said they've actually known each other since high school and were teammates at Georgia. And so there's a long relationship there. And he said George Pickens is the easiest receiver in the world to throw the ball to because he's just always open and he catches everything, and it requires no real skill from the quarterback. So yeah, but interesting. I mean, I think if you were of the opinion that there's not going to be a real quarterback competition, I think this is another piece of evidence to the contrary, that they are, I mean, they're preparing Justin Fields to be ready to compete by working him with the first team center and the first team receiving group, and there's certainly, it's different than it was when it was clearly defined, hey, Kenny Pickett's the starter and Mitch Trubisky's the backup.
Yeah, it's different. So they're mixing it up a little bit, and they're trying to, I think, prevent an imbalance there by the time training camp rolls around, so they can really evaluate Fields and Wilson and see where they're at. So that's interesting. Another interesting piece of news, it seems like you got most of the news, but I did talk to Cordarrelle Patterson for the first time. He talked about, you know, this is his first week here for OTAs. He said he's here now. He's got a little bit of old man soreness, he said, and that was his exact words. So he's not ramping up completely yet. But he talked a lot that I thought was interesting about the kickoff rule. Obviously, that is why they signed him. He said literally hours after that rule got passed, he got multiple phone calls to get signed, and the Steelers were obviously the one that he chose to sign with, partially because of Arthur Smith, partially because he wanted, you know, Mike Tomlin, all of that. I thought it was interesting when he was asked what meeting rooms he was going to be in this year, and he said he's in a little bit of everything. He said he's even been in with the quarterbacks. Yeah, he said I've sat in with the quarterbacks. They might throw in a play for me to throw something there, and apparently he's done that in the past.
I'll tell you what, he's a bigger dude than I realized.
He's big.
Like, he's a tall, but not just tall, but like broad-shouldered guy. Looks like he could play tight end.
Yeah, it's interesting. He actually joked that he would play tight end if they let him. But it seems like, you know, that running back wide receiver hybrid that we've kind of seen him be over the past few years is what he is going to be. Primarily, he will be running back, but he will be split out, you know, into the slot in a little bit. They'll use that background, give him some manufactured touches, it seems like. He said he's been watching a bunch of XFL tape to try and get this new kickoff rule down, but he's very confident that he's going to be very good at it because he said, you know, maybe when I was younger, my game was predicated off speed. It's off vision now, and that's, he really thinks that this new rule is going to be basically like run plays, where you're going to have to, you know, be a very decisive return. You're going to have great vision. He feels like he has that, and if you watch his tape, obviously, he is one of the greatest kick returners to ever step on an NFL field. So I'm interested to see where that goes, but very, very interested in him. He's a guy that's clearly extremely excited to be here in Pittsburgh. Just, you know, he loves working with Arthur Smith. And more than that, he is excited to play for Mike Tomlin. So I'm very interested to see how they use Cordarrelle Patterson. You talked with Jaylen Warren today. We've been talking about this kind of underrated storyline that maybe Warren is one of the guys that gets extended this year. You talked about it. He's a restricted free agent next year, so it's almost certain he will be back next year no matter what. But it's possible they extend him.
Yeah, he said, it's not something he's really even thinking about right now, that, his contract is, like you said, he's probably here next year. They have the right of first refusal, and it's pretty rare that a guy like that would not be back. But, he said, I'm focused on the season, winning the Super Bowl. It's not even in his head right now. So it doesn't seem like, at least from Jaylen Warren's perspective, there's a heavy focus on a contract extension right now or something like that. He said it's kind of out of his mind. So it doesn't seem like that's at the front of the radar in terms of what the Steelers are looking for. It's very interesting. Everyone we've talked to this offseason about their contract, Cam says they're far apart. James Daniels says they told me we're not getting a deal. Jaylen Warren says we're not even thinking about it. I don't know. They're going to extend somebody, I would assume, but we're kind of checking off the boxes, right? There's not that many left.
So we haven't talked to Najee Harris yet. That's a big one. And Pat Freiermuth has been eerily quiet about it.
Pat Freiermuth is quiet about very little also, so it's a little suspicious.
Maybe, we kind of talked about that on Tuesday. Maybe it's Pat Freiermuth that they're trying to get done here first. Or who knows, maybe they're giving TJ Watt an extension. Who knows? There could be so many.
I guess the quarterbacks are theoretically possible too.
Yeah, I mean, Fields and Ross are possible too. So who knows? They have so many expiring contracts. Could be E-Rob for all we know. He's on an expiring deal too. I mean, they could have so many different ways, but who knows which way it's going to go? Who knows if they sign anybody before?
They're just going to use all that money on Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. We'll kind of see where that goes. But I anticipate one or two guys are going to get deals before the season starts, and we'll kind of see. But who knows where that ends up happening. I also talked a little bit today with Broderick Jones. Caught up with him again for, I think this is the 4th time I've talked to him, just about, the tackle room. He says Troy Falatanu is taking some nice steps. Feels like the game's getting slower for him. The more drills, the more technique they're doing. Broderick's really trying to teach Troy, just the way to go back things. He said Dan Moore's being an extreme help to Troy Falatanu. I mean, he said that they will stay out for an hour, just Dan and Troy out on the field mentoring him. I think, whatever you think of Dan Moore as a player, that's an extremely, not everybody is doing that with the guy that is, theoretically drafted to replace him. I think that speaks a lot about what Dan Moore is as a teammate and a person.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a number of guys like that have been really, really quality vets for this team this year. I think they're in a pretty good place in terms of mentorship and leadership. Joey Porter was saying that he thinks he can be a leader of these young guys too, even though it's only his 2nd year. He said we don't have a lot of older guys at corner, and he feels like that's his responsibility to step up. And Joey's a guy obviously been around the game for a long time, probably older than his years, I would say. Yeah,
you talked to him today pretty in-depth, and something that I thought was interesting when you told me what you talked to him about was running it back in training camp. You remember all the highlights, specifically the one-hander where Pickens caught it one-handed and, put the ball right in Joey Porter Jr.'s face last year. But it seems like the young PZ is pretty excited to go back to Latrobe and run it back with George. Huh?
Those two were going at it today in practice, which is why I asked him, and he said, yeah, he's really looking forward to it. It's going to be, he said, it's going to be the same intensity. It's not going to be different now that he's more established in the league. So I'm looking forward to that. That should be fun. Yeah. And I also talked to Joey about what he's working on. We talked about the penalties, and he said part of it is just, you can't get that reputation. You got to, he said one call turns into 2, turns into 3. And so kind of, he said there's not one thing he's focused on, but it's something that's at the top of his mind. And man, if he could clear that up, the rest of his rookie season was pretty strong.
I do too. I do want to talk about 2 guys that we talked to that might not be on your radar. You talked to Thomas Graham. I talked to Nate Metters. These are 2 of those future contract guys that go very under the radar when they sign, 15 of them in January. Nate Metters is having a nice week. I talked to him throughout the week of the plays he's made on the football. Today he had 2 pass breakups, one on a cover 2 hole shot, another down in the red zone. And then he also talked about on Tuesday, he got a pick down in the red zone as well. He's a former press man corner. He's a big dude. He's about 6'2". He's got long arms. He's got, I think he says 205. He's a big dude. He's a safety, but he thinks he can play wherever. He's played in the nickel. He's played in strong. He's played free. And he's he said he thinks that he can be in that slot corner job. He can be a guy that's kind of creeping up on you. I think it's interesting. This is now his 3rd year in the NFL. He's been under Harrison Smith in Minnesota. Basically said when he came out of college, when he came out and went to Minnesota, they put him in safety, and Harrison Smith took him under his wing. You can have a lot worse mentors than Harrison Smith. That's a great mentor to have, actually. when you're having there. And now he's here with Minka Fitzpatrick, who is teaching him tricks of the trade. Just someone to watch. He's had a nice week here. When we get to, you know, training camp and all the likes. We talked about Elijah Riley around this time last year. He ended up making the team. Just keep an eye on Nate Metters. You talk with Thomas Graham. He's a guy in the slot job. We've talked about this guy, Scott and Beanie Bishop. But Thomas Graham is also in that spot.
Yeah, he's a guy that I think, you know, kind of looks the part. Like, he's one of those sort of slightly undersized guys, but really quick, has good hands. I think he's someone that, you know, I think Beanie's done a really nice job for himself as an undrafted free agent. And like Cam Sutton, obviously, is going to come in and kind of own that role in the big picture, but there's a strong likelihood that Cam Sutton is going to be suspended for the start of the season. I think those three guys, really, Graham and Beanie and Josiah Scott, are going to be in a battle for not just a roster spot, but kind of like significant playing time in week 1. And I think Graham has done, I mean, for a guy that you know, he's just a name on the roster when you sign him, you know, no expectations. I think he's looked really nice. Yeah, I do too. So we'll kind of see where everything goes from here. We'll be back next week for mandatory minicamp. There's 3 days of mandatory minicamp. Everyone will be here because it's mandatory. Rather, these are voluntary. You get fined if you're not. So. Yeah, so everyone is expected to be here. Everyone's pretty much come through here with contract talks regardless. So we do expect that. And then obviously it's a month off and then it's the trip. So we'll see where this team goes next week, folks. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell. Check out all the stuff that's coming at SteelersNow.com. Afternoon Drive will be coming shortly after this video goes out as well. Thanks for watching, everybody.